Hello and welcome to College Football Throwdown, episode 140. I'm your co-host Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined as always by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Hello there, everybody. We're coming to you recording on Monday, November 28th to talk about Nebraska's victory over Iowa, a bunch of the big games from this past week, and what the current playoff implications are as we get into the conference championship game, as it will determine so much.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I like it.
Yep. And observant fans will probably know that there was another big piece of news in the last week, which is, of course, the hiring of Nebraska's new football coach, Matt Rule, which we were kind of anticipating that a coaching announcement would come after the Iowa game, regardless of if we won or lost. However, we're going to do a separate podcast coming up here to go over all the details of that and give our thoughts and impressions and what we've heard. But look forward to that episode.
That sounds good. I like it.
All right. And one other quick shout out here. As we mentioned, we always encourage our listeners to write into the podcast. You can email at huskerpete13@gmail.com or leave a comment on any of the iTunes or Apple Podcast areas that you can reach out.
Media.
Yeah, you can reach out to the podcast. And we heard from a loyal listener, Brad Hears, that he listens to the podcast while he's trucking across the country. So shout out to you, Brad.
All right. Yes. Good to hear from him, and really appreciate him taking the time to listen to us babble.
That's right. Our intelligent analysis is what you meant to say.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And so I'm the one cracking the cold beverage here today. More of my Kona Brewing Company Longboard Island Lager. I brought some of this with me when I went down to San Diego for Thanksgiving, where I recorded the last podcast. So I brought some back with me. So here we go.
All right.
All right. So diving into things, we have sort of an interesting situation on this podcast where you were actually the optimistic one for once in our predictions, where you predicted that Nebraska would beat Iowa 21-17, while I predicted that we would lose in a low-scoring 17-10. And of course, Nebraska ended up winning 24-17, so pretty darn close to your score. It was an ugly win, not still a lot of the same problems that we've been seeing recently. But it was a really valiant effort by our defense to keep us in the game in the fourth quarter when things were getting tight, and us being able to capitalize on mistakes that Iowa made.
That is correct. I just rewatched the game, Alex, and it's even more obvious on a second review. A couple of things. One, that absolutely we win this game because Iowa made all these uncharacteristic mistakes. The turnovers, the penalties. I mean, they had all the things that they usually rely on us to do so that we can self-destruct and they can win the game. We did it to them. So it was an absolute reversal of fortunes in terms of how that all played out. And then they simply had no ability to have a balance or any complementary offense going on at all. So they were really hamstrung by their own decisions, right? Like their coaches, I think, made some really poor strategic choices that opened the door for us to be successful.
Right. Like how they were kind of trying to stay balanced between their running game and their passing game. And their passing game was having some serious issues. Whereas when they really committed to the run later in the game, they kind of found that with our defense starting to tire out because our offense was 3-and-outing and stuff, they were really able to just move the ball on us.
That is correct. Although I will tell you, on the rewatch, they were having a lot of running success even early in the game. They just didn't remain committed to it, right? They would have a good running play, and get a first down or whatever, and then the next first down they would only get 2 yards on first down, and then they would throw it on second and third down. And it's like, man, if you guys had just remained committed to the run, you were averaging about 6 or 7 yards a carry if you just committed to it.
Yeah, but you're correct. Iowa was -3 in the turnover game by the end of it, and we led them 17-0 at halftime, which included a missed field goal by us. So some
Yes.
dropped points on the board there. And I was watching part of the game on my phone, but I was also at the Del Mar racetrack there in San Diego with your brother AJ. So I wasn't able to fully absorb the game, but you were texting me, I know, at halftime, being worried that, we hadn't scored enough given the mistakes that they had made, and that 17 points wasn't enough of a lead. And we came out in the second half and were able to, capitalizing off another of their mistakes, go up to 24-0. So at that point, I mean, you're more than 3 touchdowns ahead. So that usually should be secure. But of course, Nebraska is infamous for losing games. I was reminded that we led them last year like 24-6 or something like that. And then they came back on us in a game that you and I were physically watching in San Diego last year.
Right. Absolutely. And our ability or inability, I'll say it this way, Nebraska's inability to be able to defend the run consistently so that a team can't just line up and smash us until we relent. And then our propensity to just make mental error after mental error. And as we were progressing through that second half, you could see the mental errors. First there were some mental errors on defense where we had been doing a pretty good job of keeping the ball in front of us, and we were giving up a lot of 9 and 12-yard runs and stuff, but we were not letting them crease us and run for 40. Well, sure enough, that's exactly what we did, and it was just bad gap integrity, bad gap commitment, and this guy just hit the crease and was gone, right? And then we had poor tackling, and the guy scores. Then on the very next play, after their touchdown, they kick the ball off, and instead of being wise, because you've got a 24-7 lead, what you want to do more than anything is catch that ball if it's in the end zone, or let it go into the end zone, let it be a touchback, start off on the 25-yard line, because we have not been a successful kickoff return team all season. It's not our strength. Why try to do that in the last game of the year when it's clearly been something you struggled at? But no, our guy takes it 2 or 3 yards deep in the end zone, and what happens? Our kickoff return team has not blocked the thing well, and the guy ends up getting tackled at like the 10 or 11-yard line, 14-yard line, something like that. And of course, there's also a penalty on the play, and we end up starting that drive like on the 6 or 7-yard line.
Right.
That leads to a 3 and out. They get the ball. I mean, it just creates the snowball, right?
Right.
Because, but that wasn't the coach's fault. That was a kid making the wrong decision. Okay. And that on defense, it's kid making wrong decisions. On our next offensive series, we snap the ball, and it's a bad snap. It's actually too early. Our quarterback isn't expecting it. He has to jump on it, and just to keep it from being a turnover. But now you're behind the chains, and it's second down and 15 or whatever, and you end up 3 and outing. I mean, just stupid little shit like that. And the next thing you know, Iowa's committed themselves to the run. They've stayed focused on it, and wham, bam. And they've started getting their tight ends involved with some really simple, low-risk play-action passes that are perfect. And so that's their passing game, and they start kicking our butt physically.
Right. Interesting looking at the stats. We actually did run it more than we passed it. We rushed it 35 times for 51 yards, whereas we threw it 30 times for 278 yards. So we were running it, but we weren't having any success. So we were having to rely on the throwing game, to have success on offense, which worked in the first half. But then in the second half, they started adjusting. And like you said, we made some mental errors that put us in bad situations to start off with. And
they made a change because earlier in the game, our hopefully all Big Ten / all Big Ten honorable mention wide receiver Trey Palmer basically had a matchup where he was able to just beat the guy.
Right.
And they switched up and started locking their best cornerback on him. No matter where he was on the field, that guy was on him.
Right.
It was the man thing, and he shut him down.
And you'll recall that this was a good call by the coaches because their top defensive back got hurt on a series, and he was the one who was covering Trey. Then the next time we come out on offense, the first play on first down is a deep pass to Trey with this new younger guy covering Trey, and he beats him bad, and it was an 87-yard touchdown pass, right?
Exactly right. That is a great example of coaches paying attention to what's going on, and that's good coaching right there. That's very good coaching. But then it was also good coaching by Iowa to eventually recognize that discrepancy and make the commitment. And they had the ability to do that because, that was a big change for them because all of a sudden, instead of them having a boundary corner and a wide corner, they basically said, okay, this guy's locked on. No matter where this guy goes, he's staying with him so that we can't even run a motion, situation and move and get the matchup that we were getting earlier. We couldn't get it because that good cornerback was on him the rest of the day, and he pretty much got shut down. But again, to Nebraska's credit, we threw the ball to Washington, and he came through, had a spectacular catch to score our final points of the game. That score that took us up 24-0 was a thing of beauty. That was just a string pass by Thompson and a beautiful catch by Washington.
Yep. Another interesting stat for both offenses. We were 5 of 14 on third downs, while they were 6 of 16, and they were 1 of 3 on fourth down. So near the end of the game, we were at a point where you just needed to run out the clock, right? They were starting to catch up, but as long as we ran out the clock, we would win. And we get the ball and we fumble it, which is the absolute worst thing you could do. So that gave them easy opportunity at points. And thankfully, the defense stiffened up and forced them to kick a field goal in that situation. And then we get the ball back again on offense. We do nothing. I think they get the ball. Our defense manages to 3-and-out them. We get the ball again. And at this point, it's like, okay, just get 1 or 2 first downs and the game's over. And we still couldn't do that when we were running the ball because we were trying to run the clock, make them use their timeouts. Right. But we couldn't get a darn first down.
Right. And that's a huge blunder by the offensive staff at Nebraska. You don't go into, what do I want to say? Shut it down mode. Okay. With 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, that's way too soon to stop running your offense. And we basically stopped throwing the football, except on third down. It was so predictable. Okay, Nebraska's going to run it twice and then throw it on third down. And that's the way we were for 3 or 4 series. It was the offense became completely unimaginative and very predictable. And you were already playing one of the best defenses in the country. So, giving them that, assistance allowed them to just completely shut us down.
Yep. But credit to Bill Bush and the defensive players, because once again, although they did start to give up more of those runs in the second half when it really mattered at the end of the game, they came clutch and managed to stop them and save our butts when the offense couldn't.
Right, exactly. And that's why this team, and that's why no lead is safe kind of thing, because we have an offense that we can't rely on to get a first down on a 3rd and 3, and defensively, although I feel like Bill Bush created miracles in terms of how he was able to scheme around our weakness and still put pressure on the quarterback and do things that caused problems for some of the opponents that we had. But he had a defensive line that was simply incapable of stopping the running game. Right, there was no neutralization at the line of scrimmage. Iowa was just crushing us, and yet we found a way. Right, and that's a huge credit to the coaching staff for calling a game that allowed them to do that. But the physical limitations on our defensive line was so apparent.
Right. So still though, an ugly W is still a W. It was great to beat Iowa in their home stadium. You'll play spoiler like we talked about last week because Iowa, if they beat us, they had a free ticket to the Big Ten championship game. But since we beat them and then Purdue later in the day beat Indiana, now Purdue all of a sudden is the West champion in a weird series of events and is going to go play in that game. So it was great to end on a win. We're finishing the season at 4-8. So another, disappointing year. But we can see that, Mickey Joseph has kept the players playing hard even up to the final game, and we even had Trey Palmer, who we talked about earlier. In this game, he broke the single season receiving record at Nebraska with 1,043 yards, and he declared that he's going to the draft afterwards. So, pretty amazing that in a year where we were 4-8 and terrible, we still managed to set a record like that.
Right. I know. Well, and you said it, and so I'll just reiterate because I know we'll talk about him more. But yeah, Mickey and the staff really deserve a lot of credit for pulling it together, hanging in there, having the right message for the players to keep them committed to keep their effort up and keep playing hard. And I feel like it was a great scene at the end of the game. The way those players, were able to enjoy that win, that victory with Husker fans and with their coaches. I mean, it was obvious the affection that the players have for Mickey and for Bill Bush. I mean, his defensive players were just all over him, hugging him, wanting to take pictures with him, all that sort of stuff. So that was a big deal for those coaches and those young men.
Definitely. And we'll talk more about Mickey, Bill Bush, and the rest of the staff in the next episode where we discuss Matt Rule and what the future of Nebraska is going to be looking like.
Yes.
Of course, in this week, there were many other big games, rivalry games to end out the year. And the big boy was, of course, Ohio State versus Michigan, number 2 versus number 3. Always a big game in the state of Michigan, no matter what, but extra big this year with them both being undefeated. And so I predicted that Ohio State was going to win 31-24. It was at Ohio State, even though I wanted Michigan to win. Whereas you predicted that Michigan would win in a kind of low-scoring 24-21 victory. But the finale, I think, the final game did not turn out the way anybody was expecting, where Michigan managed to win quite decisively, 45-23. Now that score is a little bit lopsided because Michigan got a turnover near the end of the game, was able to get an easy touchdown that kind of, I guess it would have been 38-23 in that case. But still, watching the game, once again, being at the track, I was able to watch pretty much all the first half and then got bits and pieces of the second half, but I have since watched the highlights to see the fuller picture. At the beginning of the game, it was looking like it was all Ohio State, and Michigan was just barely hanging on because their offense was really looking anemic, and, they forced Ohio State to kick a field goal at one point, I think, but the eye test for me was showing that Ohio State was the better team early on.
Well, Ohio State has some spectacular receivers and a very good quarterback, and so and they were throwing the ball around early, and so yeah, they were having some success. But what they weren't doing was running the football effectively, and that would become a significant and obvious weakness that would have influenced the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. And Michigan also, their star running back Corum, we talked about how he was injured in the previous game, and he was there, and he would go in for like a play or two and then come out because it was clear that like when he had to plant that leg that he had hurt, he wasn't able to get his usual explosiveness out of it. So
that's correct.
So him being a question mark looked like, because Michigan likes to run the ball. So having him out was a real problem for them. But then as the game progressed, it turned out that Michigan, not only was their quarterback McCarthy able to kind of prove his doubters wrong and show that he can throw the deep ball in certain situations, he was able to beat them on some big passes, but they also had some big running plays where other running backs went for big yardage, and they scored a lot of their touchdowns on just singular massive plays.
Yes. So here's the thing, Alex. I was amazed, and I was talking with some of my Michigan friends, of course, Brian and a couple of other Michigan fans back in Michigan. And the bottom line was the defensive scheme that Ohio State committed to was designed to stop their running game. But to do that, they were basically committing an extra player to the box, and oftentimes either had only one safety, or in some cases, no safeties.
Yeah.
Like everyone was up on the line of scrimmage, man on man, and basically daring Michigan to throw the football. And they seemed convinced in their strategy and their game plan. They seemed convinced that the quarterback at Michigan would not be able to consistently make completions and make them pay for this aggressive, scheme. And they were wrong. Now, the thing that blows me away is I felt like Ohio State never really came off of that game plan, even when Michigan began to expose them with it. Because ultimately, even when you load up like that, you're still susceptible to the running game. People used to do that to back in the old days against Nebraska, and Tom Osborne would ultimately make them look foolish. He would eventually figure out how to block the extra guy or fake him out, with an option package blocked a certain way, and the next thing you know, we're going to the house on almost every other play. And it seemed like in the second half, Michigan did that, right? Like by the second half, their running back was almost every time he touched the ball, he was going to the house.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I believe Ryan Day fired a lot of his previous defensive staff because of the loss to Michigan in the previous year. Right.
Yeah.
And this new staff seems to have done well. Obviously, they made it undefeated into this game. So like you say, it is strange that when Michigan started to figure that particular scheme out, they didn't adjust. They kind of stuck to their guns.
They did. They doubled down, so to speak. And it's a head scratcher. It's the reason Michigan won the football game, frankly, because I feel like, Michigan played very well defensively. Don't get me wrong, but they were Ohio State was capable of scoring enough points if they had been able to hang around and stick with it. I think the offense would have been good enough, but that defense and they just didn't give themselves a chance, as far as I'm concerned. I think that defensive strategy was terrible, and when it got exposed, they seemed unwilling to modify it and go back to their more standard, two shell approach with two safeties. I just, it's unexplainable to me.
Yeah. So obviously last year, Michigan beating Ohio State for the first time in many years at home at the Big House in Michigan was a big deal and was widely celebrated in Michigan. But this time they were able to beat them by a bigger score, and it was in Ohio, at Ohio State, at their stadium. So I'm sure there was plenty of partying going on all night in Ann Arbor. I know your friend Brian Clower was no doubt overjoyed to see them win in such a great way. And I've seen some headlines and discussions from Ohio State, certain fans and stuff that seems very hyperbolic to me, like that Ryan Day is now on the hot seat and, he needs to get this turned around fast. If he loses to Michigan next year, he's done, blah, 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 blah. Have you heard any of that sort of talk from your Ohio State fans?
I have heard the talk. No, not from Ohio State fans, not from my friends, but absolutely on social media and in some of the reports, some of the what do I want to call it, the new media of internet fans, that are sports talk and podcasters like ourselves, that are for the Ohio State team. That it was just that's funny to me. That's all funny. Okay, because if you're the athletic director at Ohio State, that is not the issue at all. Okay, now I would say that Ryan Day he will put enough pressure on himself, and he's going to really reevaluate again his defensive staff and say, okay, I changed my coordinator, but he came up with a bad game plan for this big game. So, is that a one-time thing and we can correct it, which is what I would likely expect to happen. There might be some position coach issues that might get shuffled, but I would be shocked if Ryan Day overreacts and fires another defensive coordinator. Because at some point, if you start firing defensive coordinators every year, guess what? You don't get the best defensive coordinators interested in your job anymore, right? Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden, no one wants to work for you when you blame them and don't give them a chance to settle in, right? So I think it would be very unwise right now for Ryan Day to do anything other than do some self-reflection and some internal scout and just get better. Just commit to getting better.
Yep, I totally agree with that. And yeah, I'm hoping that this, fit of anger from the fans is just kind of a momentary thing, and more rational minds will prevail amongst the fan base. Because
absolutely,
he's still 11-1. He had a good season, so they shouldn't be so upset.
Well, the thing is, this is another one of these negatives of this, but that is both something that used to exist, okay, in the days before a playoff, right? You had to remain undefeated, right? And there was, the sky was falling if you lost one game. That was the end of it, right? You were no longer in the national championship hunt in many years in that situation. So that made this game so very critical. Brian and I talked about this. This was the game this year. That's what it's called. Is the game. Okay. Well, in a couple of years, when the 12-team playoff shows up, this will just be a play-in game for what position you get. If you had a Michigan and Ohio State, ranked, second and fifth or whatever, well, both of those teams are getting into the 12-team playoff. So it's just positioning game. And the fans and the team are not nearly as hyperbolic for the loser. That they're just disappointed that they didn't get a higher seed.
Right.
So the magnitude of the game will be diminished in the coming years. So that's what made this game so special. It's one of the last times that they're going to do that. I mean, obviously next year they could do it and it would still matter and all that. But I'm just saying there's just a few more years of that before all of a sudden that whole dynamic of those end of year games is going to change, right? Well, those big games are going to feel different.
That's definitely true. And this game attracted apparently 17 million viewers, which I believe is the most for a college game, before the postseason, right before the playoff, and quite a number of years. So it definitely got a lot of eyeballs.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was exciting for quite a while. So it kept people's interest, right, and drew people in. Because the expectation was Ohio State was going to win, right? They were the better team supposedly. So the closer you get to the upset, then the more eyeballs come a calling.
Yep, very true. Of course, there were other big games in this past week. One upset that was quite interesting was LSU playing against Texas A&M, the Texas A&M team led by Jimbo Fisher that's already not making it to a bowl game and has had a very disappointing year. But they managed to end off strong, kind of like Nebraska, where they managed to upset highly ranked LSU 38-25. From what I saw of the highlights, it just looked like LSU's defense really wasn't able to stop Texas A&M. They got a lot of big plays on them and just kind of outscored them over the course of the game, especially in the second half. I think it got away from them. So yeah, that has serious playoff implications because LSU was a 2-loss team and now they're a 3-loss team. Their chances of making it to the playoff, even if they do win in the SEC championship game, just diminished.
Oh yeah, no, they're not getting in. I would say because of those 3 losses, even if they were able to magically beat Georgia, I think all that does is change Georgia's ranking, right? Georgia probably remains in there unless LSU just annihilated them or something. Georgia's still in the top 4, but I don't think LSU gets to go into the that would open the door for Big 12, Pac-12, Big 10 +2, right? Like Ohio State and Michigan. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And this one was interesting. South Carolina played against Clemson. South Carolina, who upset Tennessee the previous week, managed to beat Clemson by 1 point, 31-30. And I also watched the replays for that one. And yeah, and I think they both got to that score like pretty early in the fourth quarter, and then the rest of the game was just kind of a defensive battle, right? Kind of stopping each other from going further, in South Carolina trying to run out the clock by running it and stuff. So another kind of disappointing loss for Clemson this year.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. I mean, certainly early in the year, you never would have said, oh, I think, that's going to be a good game there at the end of the year. Everybody expected that. And frankly, South Carolina was looking like they were heading to a 6-6 type of season. And then all of a sudden, their offense came alive and just exploded against Tennessee, right? Scoring 63 points or whatever they did. And then they followed it up a week later, beating another top 10 team in Clemson. So that South Carolina team seems to be finding itself.
Mm-hmm. And this was another interesting upset. Oregon State playing against Oregon in that rivalry game. It was not an ugly, or it was an ugly win because Oregon State was -3 on turnovers. They fumbled it a lot. But credit to their defense. They managed to stop Oregon on a number of occasions. They made a good special teams play where they blocked a punt of Oregon's, which basically gave them the ball right at the goal line to score a touchdown. And near the end of the game, Oregon was at the goal line, and if they scored a touchdown, they would be up in the game by 3. But Oregon State made a goal line stand and stopped them, and that pretty much sealed the fate of the game. So good job to Oregon State.
Absolutely. Again, totally unexpected. I watched a lot of that game, even though it was later. Very impressed with Oregon State and they played the whole way through. And, Oregon is just, they are on the verge of something good, though. That's the thing with Oregon. They obviously, that's disappointing. They've had a couple of disappointing losses this year, but I just, and I don't know if that's because their new coach, is really going to do some great things, or whether he was reaping the benefits of his predecessor's great recruiting, right? Oregon had their previous coach, who's now at Miami, if I remember correctly. Just had done a great job of recruiting and had really stocked the shelves, so to speak, at Oregon. And the new coach was able to come in and really benefit from that, I think, this year. So the question is, are they going to be able to continue that momentum in terms of talent acquisition and supplement what they have? Because I'm going to predict Oregon could be very, very good next year.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, obviously, yeah, they've got plenty of money. They've got the talent. Got good recruiting. So they've got all the individual things they need. Plus, with USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12, right? That really leaves it open for them. They just have to worry about like Utah and Washington, really, and that's it in that Pac-12.
Right. I agree. So there's going to be some interesting things.
Speaking of USC, they played against Notre Dame, one of the big games of the weekend, because that also had big playoff implications if Notre Dame were to win and upset USC. But USC managed to pull away in the second half and won 38-27. I was watching parts of that game live because I knew that was a big one. And Caleb Williams, who was Oklahoma's quarterback last year and followed Lincoln Riley to USC, he definitely added some points to his stock for the Heisman trophy in that game, because he was scrambling all over the place, made out of some situations that looked impossible, and threw passes to make positive yardage and stuff like that. I don't know if you watched that game, Dad, but there was one in particular that I showed to your brother AJ, which was just a simple handoff between himself and the running back, right? And he gives the ball to the running back, and the defensive player bites and just tackles that running back, and he pulls the ball off at the last possible second, keeps it himself, and walks in for the touchdown. It was really beautifully executed.
Wow. I didn't see that particular play, but no, he did. You're exactly right. There's no doubt he's going to be in New York City, for the Heisman finalist. And at this point, I would say, with the voters being able to vote officially as of today, as we're broadcasting or recording this podcast, he's top of mind, right? Top of mind awareness, end of season. And frankly, because one of the advantages for these premier players out on the West Coast is, a lot of the voters don't see him, right? They just don't see them except for a few times a year. And if you play well on the few occasions when people stay up late enough to watch those Pac-12 games, then it's a big deal. And I don't know how he played in the game against Utah that they lost, but if he didn't play very well, people have long since forgot that, right? Where all the other candidates, like the Ohio State quarterback, just didn't have a good day against Michigan. So you have a couple of bad games and you're out of the conversation.
Right. Or Bo Nix at Oregon, right? Also a bad day.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
Yep. And here are two upsets that probably made some Nebraska fans happy. Oklahoma played against Texas Tech and lost in overtime 51-48 because they missed the field goal in overtime. And then Minnesota managed to upset Wisconsin and beat them 23-16.
Yes. Now, interesting on both fronts. Okay. Both having kind of implications to our next podcast, little teaser. I'm going to throw a couple of teasers out there. Number one, that coach at Texas Tech, he's from the Matt Rule tree. He actually was a high school coach in Texas that Matt Rule tapped to become part of his staff when Matt became a coach at Baylor, became the head coach at Baylor, and now finds himself the head coach at Texas Tech and has taken them bowling in his first year at Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the Minnesota Wisconsin side of things, I think that loss probably sealed the fate of the decision by Wisconsin to give the coaching job to Luke Fickell rather than the native son Jim Leonard, who had been the interim coach there, and most had presumed he was going to be the guy that was next in line because that's the way Wisconsin does it, right? That's the way Coach or Barry Alvarez had done in the past. Is someone from his coaching tree had kind of been handed the gift of the keys, and now this wasn't happening, right? So now, in all likelihood, the pursuit of Luke Fickell had happened way before then, but I think this made it much more palatable, and there's much more unity probably in the Wisconsin fan base, knowing that Luke Fickell was the right choice in this situation.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that more on the next podcast, but I also
We
agree
will.
that played a factor into it.
And I'm going to mention one more thing, the little teaser that we'll talk about in the next podcast that involves that Clemson, South Carolina game. So we'll talk about that on the next podcast.
All right. Very cool. So of course now we have, we've reached the end of the regular season, sad for all of us football fans out there. But we're getting to the conference championship games, which is always exciting. And some of them we already knew in advance. But the finals, in the Pac-12, we have USC Utah. In the Big 12, TCU Kansas State. And the SEC, Georgia LSU. In the Big 10, Michigan Purdue. And in the ACC, Clemson North Carolina. Now, in terms of, playoff implications, one game I wanted to mention but forgot was TCU played against Iowa State, and they crushed them 62-14. I think they scored like 24 points in the first quarter alone, which I think was good for them because some people have kind of questioned, their resume this year, but that was a statement win for sure. So the top four, my prediction would be that Georgia will obviously stay where they were at number 1. Michigan will be number 2 because they beat Ohio State. TCU will move up to number 3 because Ohio State lost. And then LSU, who was ranked above USC previously in the previous week's rankings, they lost, and then USC beat a well-regarded Notre Dame team. So I think it's quite obvious USC will be number 4. So we're in a situation where if all 4 of those teams win, as they're expected to do, if the favorites win, then it's a simple exercise for the playoff committee, and those 4 teams will be in our playoff finals. The interesting thing is if there are upsets in those conference championship games. That's where things can get a little screwy.
Right. Because if you look at who's likely to be 5 and 6 and 7, right, it's predictably going to be Ohio State, even though they lost to Michigan. Because again, that Michigan score is more lopsided than the actual game. In terms of late in the game, Michigan had 2 explosive touchdowns, right? That made that score look more lopsided. And that is the only loss they have, right? But now you've had Alabama sitting back there. They were like 8th or 9th, but now because of all the losses in front of them, they are creeping themselves right back into the conversation.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, actually, Alabama was 7th last week.
Yeah.
They were just below LSU and USC. So likely now they will be the number 5 team.
You think they will be ahead of Ohio State? If that's true, that is classic ESPN manipulation and SEC bias. There's no way.
I'm sorry. You're correct. I think Ohio State will likely be number 5, and then Alabama will be 6.
Yes, and that's the way it better stay, or I'm going to lose it on this podcast next week.
Right. Well,
you will hear. We'll have to. Code it with cuss words.
Explicit. It'll be explicit podcast.
Yeah, it'll be explicit. That's the word.
Okay. Well, I think, if I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, I think the argument that an Alabama fan would make is that they did lose twice, but both were to, teams that are considered to be good, Tennessee and LSU, and they were both by like 1 point, right? Like they were very close games down to the wire. Whereas Ohio State lost in more of a dramatic fashion to Michigan. However, of course, obviously Ohio State only has the 1 loss to a very highly regarded Michigan team, and both of them are not playing in their conference championship games, so neither of them they're equal on that point.
Right. Well, and the 2 losses you said were both good teams, both lost. Tennessee got its ass handed to them by South Carolina. So Tennessee is now a team that has 3 losses, right? Or at least. And LSU lost to Texas A&M. So And keep in mind, Alabama has 3 or 4 one-score victories this year.
Right.
They
Texas A&M
played it
almost
tight.
beat them.
Right. They played it tight. I mean, tight, right? Where Ohio State pretty much dominated everybody else they played except for Michigan. So, I mean, I'm sorry. I look at those two resumes and I don't think they're even close. And the only reason that there's even discussion of this is because it's Alabama and because it's SEC. And you've got the shills like that idiot down there in Alabama, Feinbaum, who's a complete idiot. And ESPN has propped this guy up. He's not even a good football analyst. He's just an ego-driven dip who has found an angle as a sports columnist or sports commentator because he happens to live in Alabama. I think I don't value anything he says. He's got no credibility to me at all as a football analyst. Now, does he have a lot of connections, and can he be the guy that leaks information about this team or that? Oh, sure, he's got that, but that's all he is.
I did just check. Tennessee is a 2-loss team. They're 10-2, but LSU has 3 losses currently.
Okay, so Tennessee lost to Georgia and South Carolina.
Right. Correct. And they lost badly to both. Both were not close.
Right.
Right. And I think it's good to raise the point that Alabama also had some close calls earlier in the year where they nearly lost, whereas Ohio State was pretty solidly ahead of most other teams they played this year.
Exactly.
So I think you're correct. Ohio State will be 5. Alabama will be 6.
Trust me, the SEC machine has basically, really 2 weeks to make their pitch. And they're using all the resources they can. Every commentator, they've got all kinds of national columnists having the conversation about, Alabama, and comparing Alabama to the USC, they're practically ignoring Ohio State. And then when they do bring up Ohio State, they almost act like, they're the third team in the discussion. They're not. The discussion is really between Ohio State and USC. Has nothing to do with Alabama and shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. No.
Done.
I mean, if USC wins, they'll be a 1-loss team. They'll be the Pac-12 champion. They also only lost by 1 point to Utah earlier in the year.
Right.
So, I think if USC wins, there's no question to me that they'll be in and Alabama won't. Like, that's a silly argument. The argument between Ohio State and Alabama is more interesting to me.
I don't think so. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. If you're being objective and you're being consistent with how they've treated these decisions historically in past college football playoffs. So that's all I'm going to say, because they have, and so if that becomes a thing, because USC does lose to Utah, I don't think they're going to. I think USC lost to Utah out there at Utah at a night game. It was kind of a trap, right? Like the perfect storm for Utah, and Utah still only won by 1 point, right? So now they're playing in Vegas, the big lights, an environment where USC is very comfortable. USC, I think, has been trending very with some improvement as the season has progressed, and so I have a feeling USC is going to play very well now. But having said that, I really don't know how good Notre Dame is, and Notre Dame was able to hang around with them. Yes, it was an 11-point victory, but it just seemed like USC had opportunity after opportunity to kind of bury them and just be done with it, and they couldn't do it.
Right. And Utah is coming off of a close loss against Oregon, and then in the last week they crushed Colorado 63-21. So, typical of a Pac-12 school, they clearly have some offensive firepower. But I think, as we mentioned, Caleb Williams at USC had a great game. I haven't really been following their games too much, but clearly he's playing well. And so if they're able to build momentum off of that, playing at a neutral field, I also agree. I think USC has got this one.
I would agree.
What's your score prediction then?
Well, again, because I think Utah's going to, their game plan is going to be the same as it was before. they're going to try to keep it close, but I think USC is going to try to open it up and force Utah into more of a back and forth game. And remind me what the score of that early season one was. Wasn't it pretty high? Wasn't it like
Yes.
42 to 41 or something?
43-42.
Yeah, 43-42. Okay. So, both teams can score if they have to, but I just have a feeling that, it's a championship game. There tends to be a little bit of a feeling out period, and then one team or the other kind of gets the advantage, and then there's a letdown on the other side. So I'm going to predict a USC victory. I think it's going to be more significant than their last meeting, and so I'm going to say, let's do USC 38-21 for Utah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to go a bit differently, a bit higher scoring. I think I'll say that USC will score 45 and that Utah will score 35. I think Utah has enough talent to keep it close, but that, kind of similar to the Notre Dame game, USC will be just that bit better and hold on to their lead.
Okay. I think I like your score. That's a good analysis.
All right. Speaking of that, the other kind of rematch that we're getting in these conference championship games is TCU versus Kansas State. TCU beat them at home for TCU 38-28. And so now Kansas State's getting a second shot at a neutral, quote unquote, field, though it's in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That classic Big 12. It's neutral as long as it's in Texas.
Yeah, of course. So what's your prediction here?
Well, man, TCU looked good last week. I'm going to say TCU's going to win. But I will say that I think this is the one that's most of the four that we've talked about that are likely to be in the playoff. This is the one that I'm least confident in terms of the outcome, because I really think Kansas State's capable of winning this football game. But I feel like this one's going to be high scoring. I think this one's going to be maybe a little bit more like what you said. It's going to be a 48-35 victory for TCU, but it's going to be a score fest.
Yeah, that could well be. And I believe Kansas State has still been playing. They beat Kansas last week. They did. They've still been playing their kind of throwing quarterback guy because Adrian was still hurt, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Adrian's available, but their backup has been playing so well that I think they've basically just made the decision that they're better with him. And not that I would say Adrian has been completely replaced, because I have a feeling that, like in this championship game, if K-State was struggling, they would be inclined to switch it out and put Adrian in again rather quickly. So this young kid's gonna have a quick hook if he doesn't perform well, but I think they actually look like a better team when he's playing rather than Adrian.
Right. Okay. I agree. I'm going to predict a little bit lower scoring, but I think it will be close. I think TCU will win 38-31 over Kansas State and cement their place in the playoff.
And my point was that TCU is going to win, but I could see a scenario in this championship where K-State wins this thing comfortably. You know what I mean? Right. I obviously am choosing TCU, but I could see it going the other way.
Mm-hmm. Well, to TCU's credit, they've been in some close games this year, but they've always found a way to come back and manage to squeak out the W. So
I agree.
They've got that touch in them.
Yep.
And then there's Michigan, Purdue. Now Michigan coming off of the great win against Ohio State, having to go up against Purdue in the very divided, beaten up West, right? The West teams all kind of beat each other up. And so we were in this free for all where there were multiple teams that Illinois could have still made it to the championship if things had gone a certain way. Last weekend. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, I feel like Michigan should have this one pretty well in control, unless Purdue, they do call them the spoiler makers. So, they have made some crazy upsets before, but I'm not sure this is the one.
What's your score?
Uh, I'll say that Michigan will end up winning, and let's say it's 38 to 24.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's a good score. Um, okay, so here's my thoughts. I would agree with you. I think Illinois was the best team in the West this year. And Illinois, frankly, should have beaten Michigan, right? Illinois put the biggest scare in Michigan all season. Illinois was able to hold them because of their defense. Purdue's got a pretty salty defense at times, but then at other times it gets blown up, right? So it's kind of hit or miss with them. I think Michigan's going to have a little bit of a hangover from the Ohio State game, but I also feel like there's an equal chance that they're going to be energized by it because they won that they won against Ohio State with their best player on the bench.
Right.
And I don't know what his status is going to be for this week. I'm going to presume that he's still either going to be only spot used or not used at all and saved for, the first round of the playoffs or whatever, unless required. So he's going to be a only if necessary kind of decision at the beginning of the game. I'm going to say that the score is going to be similar to what you just described. You said 38-24. I'm going to say it's going to be 42 Michigan to 24.
Okay. That'll be an interesting one. And then the last of the playoff relevant championship games, we have Georgia LSU. Obviously, disappointing for LSU, right? If they were going to this game with only 2 losses, you could maybe argue, that they still had a chance. But with 3
Right.
losses, it's pretty out of their hands, even if they do manage to win. And Georgia, who played against Georgia Tech, did their usual thing where their offense didn't look great at the beginning, but their defense is just so good that they held Georgia Tech down, and then their offense got going late, and I think it was like 38-17 or something like that.
Right.
So I expect to see that defense come to play again. They've been here before. They are the defending national champions. So I think that they will be focused and ready to go and not look past this LSU team. So I'm going to predict maybe a little lower scoring game, but that Georgia wins, let's say 24 to 13.
Interesting. I think it's going to be higher scoring. I agree with you that Georgia's going to win. I think it's going to be higher scoring, and I think it might be a little tighter. And here's why. The coach at LSU, Brian Kelly, is a pretty darn good coach, and he just got embarrassed a little bit there, in my opinion, by A&M. So he's going to double down a little bit. And I just have a feeling LSU is going to come out fired up and really, really ready to play. But if things don't go well for them early, it could be Tank City. So there's certainly a possibility that Georgia just takes them off the mat. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the opposite, in fact. And it's going to be a tight game. And I think it's going to be a little higher scoring. I'm going to say it's going to take we're getting hung up on this number 38, but I'm going to say 38 points for Georgia, and I'm going to say 31 for LSU.
All right. Interesting. And then, of course, we have the ACC. Usually we'd be talking about Clemson, being in the hunt for that playoff spot. But with their upset loss to
South Carolina.
South Carolina, yes, thank you. They lost to South Carolina, and then North Carolina lost to NC State in double overtime,
Yeah.
who's the other ACC champion. It was already predetermined. So we have one that's 10-2, one that's 9-3. So the ACC just isn't that good this year. So those 2 losses reflect pretty badly on Clemson. So it seems like even if they do win, there's pretty much no shot of them getting in unless there's a ton of upsets and things just get totally flipped around.
Yeah. I can't see the path at all myself. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. As for the game itself, honestly, I'm going to go. This is the one where I'll predict the upset because Clemson has shown themselves to be, kind of shaky in moments, not playing with that usual poise that we've seen from them in past years, making costly mistakes and things like that. And North Carolina are clearly is susceptible to that too. But I feel like Clemson's got more pressure on them, whereas for North Carolina, this is their first time doing this in a while, and they're playing maybe more freely than Clemson in that game. So I'm going to say that it's a close one, but that North Carolina wins 31-30, reflecting Clemson's last game.
Love it. Okay. I kind of agree with you that this is going to be close. And, North Carolina, of course, coached by good old Mac Brown of Texas fame, and just keeps finding a way to have competitive teams. They don't have the talent to match up with Clemson, but I agree with you. Clemson's just in their heads a little bit, and they don't look like the Clemson team of recent years. So I would agree with you. But if it's an upset, I think it's going to be more lopsided than that. So I'll go with agreeing with you that North Carolina wins. But I'm going to say North Carolina is going to win it 31-21.
Okay, interesting. And so as a final discussion here, as we wrap up the podcast, talking about those upsets, say that Georgia and Michigan both lose in close contests, so now they both have one loss. Do you think that there's still chances that they get into that 14 playoff, or does someone else jump them into position?
Oh, no, I would say let's take them one at a time. If Georgia loses to LSU, unless it's a blowout, Georgia's still in the top four. So Georgia's in even if they lose, okay? Only in the circumstance where LSU just blows their doors out, then maybe somebody might question it. But even then, I would say the odds would still be greater than 50% that they're in. Michigan, I can't say as definitively about that. And a Purdue loss would be a massively ugly loss. So in that case, I think it might be one of those situations where Michigan would fall to 5. And of course, Ohio State would end up getting in with its one loss being to Michigan, right? And Michigan would be on the outside looking in.
Right. That would be a real unfortunate situation for Michigan fans where they beat Ohio State, but they somehow springboard them into the playoff anyways.
That would be. Well, and the thing is that interestingly, that could happen. I mean, it depends on how big a hangover Michigan has from this big victory, right? They beat Ohio State at Ohio State for the second year in a row. And last year, I would have thought that was more likely than this year. Now you'd think, okay, been there, done that. They should know what it takes, right? And not overreact and not consume too much energy. But that was an awfully big win that they had last weekend. So you could see maybe a little bit of a letdown this week.
Could be. And then with USC, I don't think there's much discussion since they already have one loss. So if they lost again, they're definitely out. And then TCU, what do you think about them? Because they're also undefeated, but I think people think that their record isn't as strong.
Right. I'm here to say that if either one of those lose, either USC or TCU, they're out.
Okay. There we go. So, and that's our scenario. We have the Ohio States, the Alabamas, kind of down there to potentially jump up into those spots if there were to be a bunch of upsets in this top 4. But of course,
right.
Ohio State is as we argue, the top contender to still make it in, since they only have the one loss to Michigan over Alabama.
I say that's not even close, even though the national conversation, they're trying to manifest Alabama being the choice.
Right.
And they'll succeed because that's what ESPN does, because that's the power of media, as we see in all other areas of our world.
Right. Well, it's interesting because there aren't that many one-loss like top-tier teams left. Most of them do have, they're either undefeated or they have 2 losses. That's kind of the scenario right now.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So, been an interesting year for football. Lots of cool upsets. So it's been fun to watch as a fan. So I think for these 4 teams that we've been discussing, it's just that kind of last push. Right? You've had a great year. You just got to get through one more game, and then you can take a bit of a break and focus on the big upcoming games. Which if things play out as expected and the favorites win, I'm very excited for this top 4 because we get some teams that we haven't had in the top 4 in some time. Yes. Based on the current rankings, we'd have like Georgia playing against USC and Michigan playing against TCU. And the winner of those.
As a guy that lives in Michigan and so follows them, I would tell you that scenario that you just described is ideal for Michigan. I think Michigan could look at that and lick their chops and say, this is the best opportunity we could have ever hoped to have. We get to play a Big 12 champion who's undefeated, so comes in with a lot of credibility, but yet is a team that, objectively, the eyeball test would say Michigan can control them, right? USC is a team that, has come on as the season has progressed and might be able to put the fear of God into Georgia, because that Caleb Williams could make the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I definitely think if you're Michigan and you have to choose between those teams, you're hoping for TCU.
Right.
So we'll see how everything plays out. We'll be doing a podcast in a week's time where we'll be talking both about the results of the conference championship games as well as the playoff rankings, which that final one, of course, is the important one. Though if all 4 teams win, though, as I'm thinking about it, if all 4 teams win, we know who the top 4 are going to be, but we don't necessarily know the order, right? Because sometimes they have swapped the order of like 2 and 3, at the last second. If like TCU blows the doors off of Kansas State while Michigan barely wins against Purdue, right?
Right.
So there are interesting scenarios there. So we'll be coming back to talk about all that coming up soon.
That sounds like a good conversation.
All right. Well, and if you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing from the fans. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.